If your favorite fighter is on this list, I'm sorry. You're probably going to be mad because this list is not about skill, it's about behavior. In 2025, some UFC fighters were absolute professionals, and some of y'all were straight up naughty boys. What's up, guys? Benway MMA here, and today we will be going over the 2025 MMA Naughty or Nice list. Our standards are pretty simple. If you were plagued by the likes of inactivity, bad performances, rank squatting, and generally were just hard to be a fan for, hard to root for in 2025, you were a naughty boy. And if you were the opposite, you were obviously nice, and you belong on the nice side of the list. Anyways, let's get started with our first fighter of the list, Ciryl Gane, who I do believe belongs on the naughty side of thing. And it really comes down to sticking his disgusting baguette fingers in Tom Aspinall's eye, ruining the heavyweight title shot for even longer. And it's been, we all know heavyweight's been in a fucked up spot because of Jon Jones the past few years. And Ciryl Gane really wants to continue the Jon Jones mantle by poking both eyeballs of Tom Aspinall and also ruining heavyweight. Beyond that, about a year ago, he also robbed Volkov. I know that was in the end of 2024, but that's what led us into this mess. He definitely did not deserve, in my opinion, a title shot for that. And those very same just disgusting baguette fingers are on Twitter now, tweeting about dumbass fights, dumbass callouts that are just fucking retarded. He's, in my opinion, being very disrespectful to Tom Aspinall and the fans. And I hope he gets his ass kicked in 2026. He kind of deserves it. And he's definitely a naughty, naughty boy. He might be the naughtiest boy on the list if you're a Tom Aspinall fan. Anyways, moving on to our next fighter, we have Jiri Prochazka, who obviously I think belongs on the nice side of the list. He's been a great boy. And if we just start off with his inside of the cage performances, he had that win against Khalil Rountree and Jamal Hill, both third round knockout / TKO. And I think he deserves it for the performances alone. Those were high risk fights with obviously amazing performances. He didn't get any tune-ups or bullshit matchups in 2025, despite losing against Alex Pereira. During the build-up to those fights, he was very professional and he was pretty gentlemanly throughout. Just kind of generally a nice guy. And he had this activity despite also having a pretty active personal life, which I think adds to him being on the nice list. For example, he had passed his finals and gotten his master's degree this year. I think that was holding him up in the middle of the year before he fought Roundtree. He wanted to make sure he got his master's degree. He also had a gender reveal for his first child, so now Jiri Prochazka is also a father. He had some really wholesome and funny moments this year. He cried literal tears of joy when Alex Pereira knocked out Ankalaev. He used a candle as lighting for his Ariel Helwani interview. Also, just over a year ago, he shaved his head for that cancer survivor, I think for the Alex Pereira fight. So generally, all around, Jiri Prochazka has been a great person this year. I think he really deserves it, and he had an excellent 2025. Moving on to our next fighter, guys, we have Kelvin Gastelum, who I believe belongs on the naughty side of the list. It's nothing specific about his performances, although those were pretty underwhelming this year. It's mostly because of his fight with Dustin Stoltzfus, where he missed weight at middleweight for the first time by 5 pounds and forced Dustin Stoltzfus to fight at 191 pounds catch weight. I think that's absolutely disgusting of Kelvin Gastelum. It's his 4th or 5th weight miss in the UFC, so it's not his first time. It's a pattern of behavior. And I think his logic behind missing weight so often is that he's willing to take a pay cut in order to have a massive advantage over his opponent and then basically expect himself to win, getting himself more overall money, if that makes sense. And if that is true, not only is Kelvin Gastelum undisciplined, fat, sloppy pig trash, he's also ethically and morally reprehensible. And I straight up believe he does not belong in the UFC for doing shit like this. I think he belongs, somewhere in like PFL or something. But if he is going to continue in the UFC, I think they need to force him to fight at light heavyweight and make an example of him, because what Kelvin Gastelum is doing is, again, absolutely disgusting. And so, yeah, I think that solidly earns him a spot in the naughty list. Moving on to our next fighter, guys, we have Valter Walker, who I believe belongs on the nice list. MMA Santa loves a good heel hook, and he has 4 in a row, 3 of them being in 2025. So he has the performances to back it up in 2025. He also has, I think, all-time great Octagon interviews. When he got the heel hook on Louis Sutherland, it was absolutely hilarious, and he called out Hamdi Al-Hamdawab and called Charles Johnson, or Charles Burnett, I mean, a chocolate Peppa Pig, which is absolutely fucking hilarious. So he's got a great personality, and if you've seen his social media, it's absolutely golden. The shit he does with his brother, Johnny Walker. So he's basically a quote merchant, and in 2025, I think he showed that he could be a potential superstar. So yeah, MMA Santa has got to put him on the nice list. And then for our next fighter, we have Manel Kape, who I believe has to be on the naughty list for a few reasons. First being that he had an eye poke combo TKO on Osman Bayev earlier this year. That was the beginning of 2025's eye poke controversies. And so I think winning off a performance like that is pretty disappointing. And then in his next fight against Brandon Royval, he grows tits, which is usually from steroids, which is not a good look on Manel Kape. He might have B cups now. And then he goes on to KO a fan favorite in Brandon Royval, which is a good performance, but in conjunction with growing literal boobs, I think it's a little suspicious. And then the last nail in the coffin, the third strike, in my opinion, is kind of not his fault, but he did pull out of that Brandon Royval fight for UFC 317 originally in June 28th, which made Joshua Van the short notice replacement, which led him to getting a title shot against Pantoja, which low-key caused Pantoja's arm to break. So you can kind of blame that on Manel Kape for pulling out on late notice again. He's done that many times. He's a pull-out merchant. So yeah, those three things combined makes Manel Kape earn a spot on the naughty list this year. For our next fighter, guys, we have Alex Pereira, who I believe belongs on the nice list. And it's pretty simple. He fought when the UFC needed him, not when it was convenient, and he did that again when he first fought Magomed Ankalaev and lost. And he kind of indicated that might be why he lost, because he was basically overworked. And, I know we have to appreciate that career consistency for him, but it might have led to his downfall. And despite that, in 2025, he was able to avenge that loss, KOing Magomed Ankalaev in the first minute and a half of round one in October. And I thought that was a very impressive performance. That alone, I think, earns him a spot on the nice list, kind of having that underdog story and reclaiming his belt. But despite that, his career consistency, the lack of professional bullshit with him, he always shows up when he says he will. He's basically a company man. I think it lands him a spot on the naughty or the nice side of the list this year. And so yeah, moving on to our next fighter, we have Khamzat Chimaev, who had his singular fight of the year. He usually does that. Sometimes he can't even have one, against DDP, which was a very, very boring fight. And so it being boring isn't the only reason he's on the naughty side of the list this year. It's the fact that, again, he has minimal activity, and his availability is pretty much always in question. It's a meme at this point if of the flu will take him down before a fight. But despite all of that just fucking bullshit, he's always making call outs. He's always calling people up a weight division, down a weight division, fucking left, right, literally anyone to stay relevant. But we know for a fact that they're bullshit, that he's not actually gonna sign a contract. He's actually not gonna make that fight. So I just hate fighters who do that. And then beyond that, I think he behaves like a child at times. We saw that with Ian Gary. He's always getting in confrontations. He just cannot. He's not capable of behaving like a responsible or professional adult. I know some retarded people out there are going to say like, oh, he's a fighter and he's letting the wolf out, man. You can't mess with him like that. Ian Gary patted his back a little too hard. And even if that's true, I think acting like a retard as your reaction or your response to like any sort of inconvenience or irritation is fucking cringe as fuck. And it earned him a spot on the naughty list this year. For our next fighter, guys, we have Carlos Prates, who had an excellent year this year. I know he started off kind of weak by losing to Ian Gary, but then he redeemed himself by beating Geoff Neal by spinning elbow knockout, and then beating Leon Edwards by a knockout in the second round, which was pretty cool because he A, removed decision merchant Leon Edwards, but B, redeemed the Fighting Nerd's downfall by KOing Geoff Neal. And then despite losing to Ian Gary, he somehow became Ian Gary's friend, which I thought was pretty hilarious and just representative of Carlos Prates in general. He overall has a very fan-friendly, style and personality. He's kind of known as the Sigs and Party guy within the Fighting Nerds. He this year maintained a great level of activity with 3 fights, which he's also been able to do in previous years. And I think the final nail in the coffin for him earning a position on the nice list, guys, was his interaction with the fan named Randy, who passed away from cancer. Before he passed away, Carlos Prates shaved his head, made him an honorary fight nerd, and generally just included him as much as possible in his fight camps, which I thought was pretty cool. Overall, he's just a super lovable new contender in welterweight, and for all those reasons, he gets a spot on the nice list this year. Moving on to our next fighter, though, we have Ilia Topuria, who is on the naughty list this year, guys. I know some people will disagree with me. He knocked out Oliveira, which was pretty cool. But let me explain. He entered 2025 as one of the UFC's biggest stars. He had massive hype, massive momentum. But if we're being honest, he is now entering 2026 with much less hype, pretty much zero momentum. And our expectations for him in 2026 are basically at the ground floor, even in the basement, they're at zero. He's basically, ever since he won that second belt, he's been trying to cherry pick fights, making the most ass backwards call outs while ignoring legitimate contenders by basically saying they don't deserve it. His ego is huge. You know, he's kind of a glorified diva at this point, and he's the reason for this bullshit interim title fight. You know, I know that the situation with his wife is going on, but ultimately, this dude's not fighting for like a year since he fought Oliveira, maybe even more, for factors that are not medical. And the Twitter fingers are really starting to get annoying. And so I think Ilia Topuria could easily get back in our good graces. But for 2025, if you really look at it, he deserves to be on the naughty list. Moving on to our next fighter, guys, we have Arman Tsarukyan, who's on the naughty list this year. And I think it's pretty obvious why. His only win this year was against Dan Hooker, which broke a long streak of inactivity for him. Yes, it was a very dominant win, and he was able to get the submission. But before that, he headbutt Dan Hooker at the face-off, which is pretty deplorable behavior. And this is coming off of a long bout of inactivity that started with him punching a fan in the previous year, which caused him a 9-month suspension, and then missing weight / injuring his back during the Islam Makhachev fight at UFC 311, which they had literally scheduled around the fact that Arman Tsarukyan was suspended for 9 months for punching that fan. And so this led to Islam Makhachev losing out on a real, title defense. He had to fight Moicano instead. So we missed out on both a legitimate Islam Makhachev title defense, but we also missed out on the greatest matchup at the time, which was Makhachev versus Tsarukyan. And then after all this inactivity, after all this bullshit that he started, he kind of acts like a bitch after losing the title shot. And he doesn't fight anybody. He weighs in, I think, as a backup for Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. And during that time period, he was offered fights, and he declined them. He was offered Gamrot, which is a fight that he had actually lost originally, and declined it. And so it was overall 2025. It was absolute jobber behavior and activity from Arman, and that earned him a solid spot on the naughty list. Moving on to our next fighter, we have Merab Dvalishvili, who is on the nice list this year, and I think it's pretty obvious, so I'm going to keep it short and simple. Despite his loss to Peter Yan, he fought 4 times this year and won 3 of them. All of those were title fights, so he had his 3 title defenses this year. His first one against Umar, his second one he finished O'Malley, and his third one against Sandhagen. All 4 of his fights this year were actually pretty entertaining, so he kind of got rid of that, reputation as being a boring fighter. He developed a lovable personality and kind of created like a genuine fan base through, both of his personality but also his social media content. And he was able to win Fighter of the Year this year, which I think it was obvious. He made weight consistently. There was no late cancellations, no bullshit. There's no real excuses, in my opinion. And overall, he kept the bantamweight division moving when it kind of needed it most. Merab Dvalishvili, he gets the nice list this year. Moving on to our next fighter, guys, we have Justin Gaethje, who I believe belongs on the naughty list. The only thing he really did this year was beat Rafael Fiziev. And off of beating Rafael Fiziev, Justin Gaethje once again argued that he should get another title shot, and he basically told the UFC and Dana White to go fuck themselves. He told them if he does not get a title shot, he's going to retire. Whether that was true or not, it worked, which I think is absolutely fucking ridiculous. I think it's a horrible precedent to set, and beyond that, I don't think Gaethje deserved it. Acting like an absolute diva is reprehensible to me. I think his top 5 status, despite having bottom tier activity, despite not really fighting the top competition, despite losing against Max Holloway pretty severely in 2024, does not deserve you a title shot. And then just divaing and holding the UFC hostage in order to get your title shot is absolutely fucking ridiculous. The selective matchmaking at the worst time is also irritating. There's so many contenders at lightweight who just refuse to fight each other. Um, I mean, featherweight, sorry. And it's irritating. And I think Justin Gaethje is one of the worst offenders. If we're going to put Arman Tsarukyan in there, we have to put Justin Gaethje in there. Moving on to our next fighter, we have Yair Rodriguez, who I'm putting there for much of the same reasons. He is also someone who decided to sit out and wait for a title shot. No, I don't think he got it. I mean, we know at this point he didn't get it. Diego Lopez is getting it. But there was a time that we thought Yair Rodriguez might get it, and it kind of sounded like he was, maybe the first in line for the title shot off of beating Patricio Pitbull. I don't think you deserve a win off of that. And the way he has behaved in the last few years, his inactivity, his constant title shots, his constant entitlement is really annoying. I think it's extremely hard to be fans of people who are very entitled in the UFC. And that describes Yair Rodriguez perfectly. He's been one of the biggest brats we've ever seen. And he refused to take fights that made sense for him this year. I mean, I know Lopez is scheduled for the title fight now, and that makes sense for Lopez. I don't see why he would, deny another title shot. But he was beefing with Yair Rodriguez, and Yair Rodriguez was kind of indicating after the Patricio Pitbull fight that he wouldn't fight Diego Lopez because he knew he was, in line for a title shot, and he deserved it most. And I think that's so untrue and so irritating that he always claims shit like that we have to put him in this in the tier list, or not the tier list, in the naughty list for 2025. Anyways, moving on to our next fighter, guys, we have Joshua Van, who I think is a super obvious contender for the nice list. That's where we're putting him. I think he was even a contender for winning Fighter of the Year. I mean, he had 5 fights in 2020, or 4 fights in 2025, just like Merab, except he won all 4 of them. I will say one of them was the Pantoja by arm injury, but the other 3, he did win, and 2 of them were ranked, one of them against a top 5 opponent in Brandon Royval, and so I think that's pretty impressive. And I think you give it to him off of that alone. I think his activity, the way he steps up on short notice, and the way he fights is super fan friendly, is very entertaining to me. He's got a no bullshit personality. He just shows up to fight. He's a true fighter. He's your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. And he's a stand-up guy. And so yeah, I think that completes the list. I think he is another guy who belongs on the nice side of the list. Anyways, that does complete our list, guys. That was the final fighter. If you agree or disagree, make sure to comment below. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And Merry Christmas. Goodbye.